At 22, Hakan thought life would be something more. Something bigger, brighter. Something worth waking up for with a spark in your eyes. But his reality was different. Each morning he'd rise before the sun in his cramped apartment, make tea, and watch the pale light spread over the city. The city was waking up, but Hakan felt like he hadn't awakened in years. He'd moved here with dreams, just like everyone else. But some dreams get chased, and others just fall asleep quietly in a corner of your mind. Hakan's were the sleeping kind. He worked in a small electronics repair shop. It wasn't a bad job, but it wasn't his passion. Day in and day out, he fixed other people's broken devices while feeling his own spirit cracking inside. Customers came and went, smiling, shouting, bargaining. And Hakan, behind his workbench, just nodded mechanically. Survival had become a repetitive task. He lived alone. His parents, back in their distant village, were proud. Their son worked in the big city, and they imagined a shiny, successful future for him. Hakan could never bring himself to tell them the truths, that some nights he'd just stare at the ceiling, wondering if this was all life had in store for him. Then, on a completely unremarkable Tuesday, something shifted. The morning was the same as always, the same dull bus ride, the same crowded streets, the same old routine. But that day, an elderly man walked into the shop. He was carrying a radio, one so old that the paint on its buttons had completely faded away. He placed it on the counter gently, as if it was something sacred. Hakan sighed. "Sir, this model is ancient. Even if I open it, I doubt I can fix it." The man just smiled. His beard was white and neatly trimmed, and his eyes were bright, like someone who had lived long enough to know what truly mattered. "It has music in it," the man said softly. "And music deserves a second chance." Hakan blinked. There was something strange, almost poetic, in the man's tone. He forced a polite smile and took the radio to the back room. He expected it to be a lost cause, but as he opened the casing, something odd happened. The smell of dust and old circuits hit him, and suddenly, he was a child again, too. He remembered sitting with his grandfather in the village, fixing an old gramophone while fireflies flickered outside. He didn't even realize he was smiling. He worked on it for over an hour, and against all odds, he fixed it. When he returned to the counter, the old man was still there, waiting patiently. "It's fixed," Hakan said, a little surprised himself. "I didn't think it would work, but it does." The old man nodded slowly, his eyes soft. "Everything works when someone truly tries," he said. Hakan was a bit confused. "How much will that be?" he asked. The old man shook his head. "Just a small amount. It wasn't too difficult." But the man didn't pull out a wallet. He took out a small, old leather pouch, worn with age, instead of coins. He removed something else, a tiny brass compass. The metal was faded, but the pointer inside was steady and sharp. He placed it in Hakan's hand. "I don't pay with money," the man said, "but with things that matter." Hakan frowned. "Sir, I can't accept this. I don't need." "You do," the man interrupted softly. "A young man shouldn't lose direction before he even starts walking." Hakan froze, his throat tightened. How could this stranger know? "How did you?" The old man simply smiled. People don't need eyes to see others. They just need to truly look." And with that, he picked up his radio and left. Hakan stood there, staring at the compass in his palm. It was ridiculous, sentimental, strange. But holding it, he felt something shift inside him, like a rusty door creaking open for the first time in years. That evening, he didn't sit silently by his window. Instead, he sat at his table, just looking at the compass. And that's when he noticed it. The pointer didn't point north. It seemed to shift slightly whenever he moved. It felt alive, reactive, almost intentional. At first, he thought it was broken. But it didn't feel broken. It felt purposeful. The next day, the old man didn't return. Hakan asked around the neighborhood, describing him to vendors and shopkeepers, but nobody had seen him. It was as if the man had existed only in that one single moment. Oh, over the next week, Hakan started to change without even realizing it. He felt more awake. He smiled a little more at work. The job didn't feel like a slow death anymore. He found himself nodding at strangers on the street, listening more, observing more. The city, which once felt so grey and lifeless, suddenly seemed full of stories. And every night, he'd find himself holding the compass. One night, feeling a little foolish, he pressed it to his chest and whispered, "What am I supposed to do?" The pointer moved just a tiny flick. Hakan sat upright. He grabbed his jacket and walked outside into the cool night air. The arrow shifted again. Slowly, step by step, the compass seemed to guide him, not in straight lines, but through winding streets, narrow alleys, and corners of the city he had never noticed before. He felt a bit silly, following this strange object through the dark. But he kept going, until he reached a worn wooden staircase attached to a dilapidated old building. The compass pointer steadied, as if to say, here Hakan's heart began to race. "What now?" he whispered to the empty air. He looked up at the creaking steps and decided to climb. Each step groaned softly under his weight. He climbed higher and higher until he reached the rooftop, and then he saw it. The entire city stretched out beneath him, a vast, glittering expanse of light, glowing, living, breathing. The wind brushed against his hair. For a long, quiet moment, Hakan just stood there. He didn't feel lost or small. He felt alive. But he wasn't alone. Something else was there on that rooftop, waiting for him. The rooftop was not where you'd expect a destiny to change. Cracked cement, rusted water tanks, the distant hum of the city below. Yet, there he was. A man about my age, legs dangling over the edge, staring at the sky. He turned as I approached, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, quickly replaced by amusement. "Compass bring you here too?" He asked, his voice casual, as if we were old friends meeting for coffee. I just stared, my mind racing. You know about it." He laughed, a light, easy sound that seemed out of place in my world of silence. He held up a compass of his own, glinting in the faint city light. "I guess we're not alone after all." My breath caught in my throat. There are others. Others with these strange, guiding compasses. Others who had been lost, just like me. Hopeless, just like me. But they had found something. Something worth following. The stranger extended a hand. "I'm David," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "Welcome to the place where lost people start becoming found." I took his hand, and, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a tiny spark flickered inside me. It was faint, almost fragile, but it was there. Hope. This was a beginning. I just didn't realize how far this compass was about to lead me. David leaned back against the low wall, his legs swinging freely over the sheer drop. It was as if sitting stories above the ground was the most natural thing in the world for him. His compass dangled from a rope around his neck. It was similar to mine, but older, the metal darker, the edges worn smooth by time and touch. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. "How long have you had that?" I finally asked. A knowing smile played on his lips. 3 years, he said. "Found it the same way you did." Or rather, he corrected himself, it found me. I frowned, confused. You mean the old man? He found you too. David shook his head. No. My compass came from someone else. Everyone's story is a little different. I sank down onto the cool cement beside him, my own compass still clutched tightly in my hand. The rooftop was quiet, save for the muffled roar of traffic far below. The city lights stretched out before us, a glowing sea of tiny, distant lanterns. What does it do? I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind. Why does it point somewhere different every time? It doesn't make any sense. David took a slow, deliberate breath, as if gathering his thoughts. It points to where you need to go, he said simply. Not where you want to go. I blinked, processing his words. Nat. Sounds like something out of a fantasy movie. He chuckled. It did to me too, at first. But then I followed it. Rin, everything changed. I wasn't sure I believed him. It was all too strange, too unreal. Compasses were supposed to point north. That was it. They didn't guide people through life. David seemed to sense my doubt. You don't have to believe it right now, he said gently. Just ... look around. Think about it. Why are you here? On this specific rooftop? On this specific night? What pushed you to walk out your door instead of just sitting in your room like you do every other day? I opened my mouth to answer, to offer some logical explanation, but the words wouldn't come. I closed it again. He was right, a dead no. Why? I only knew that for the first time in so long, I had felt a pull, a reason to move forward. As I was lost in thought, David hopped to his feet with surprising agility. Come on, he said, a new energy in his voice. The others will be arriving soon. Others. The word hung in the air. Cheat. Nodded and led me toward a corner of the roof I hadn't noticed before, hidden in the dim light. Behind a large rusted water tank was a metal doorway. David pulled it open, revealing a narrow staircase that spiraled down into the darkness of the building. I hesitated. Every rational instinct screamed at me that this was insane. Ahead followed a magical compass, met a complete stranger on a rooftop, and was now being invited down a dark staircase into who knows what. It was the plot of a horror film. But as the thought crossed my mind, the compass in my hand grew warm, a gentle, pulsing heat that seemed to urge me forward. I took a deep breath, silencing the doubt, and followed him down. The staircase opened into a dusty, wide hall. It was dimly lit by bare bulbs hanging from frayed wires, but it was clean, cared for. In the center of the room, wooden benches were arranged in a large circle. The walls were a collage of inspiration. Handwritten quotes, pinned pages torn from books, charcoal sketches, small, vibrant paintings, and detailed maps of the city. And then I saw them. Dozens of nails hammered into the walls, and from them hung compasses of all shapes and sizes. Brass, silver, wood, some new, some ancient. David flung his arms out wide, a theatrical flourish. Welcome to the circle. I stared, completely overwhelmed. You ... you run a club or something. A smirk played on his lips. We're not a club. Clubs have memberships and sign-in sheets. We don't do that here. Then what are you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Shoo. Before David could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed from the staircase. A girl in a black hoodie entered the room. She had short-cropped hair, intense dark eyes, and walked with a confident stride that told you she belonged here. A small, delicate copper compass was fastened around her wrist like a bracelet. Her eyes landed on me. Who's the new guy? She asked, her tone direct but not unfriendly, nodding in my direction. Hakan, David replied, his smile widening. Found yesterday. Have you ever felt lost? Not just in a physical sense, but lost in your own life. Stuck in a routine, feeling like you're going nowhere. What if I told you there was a way to find your direction again? But it wasn't a map, a guru, or a grand plan. It was something much simpler, something that pointed you not towards fame or fortune, but towards small acts of kindness. This is the story of Hakan, a man who had lost his way, and the peculiar group of strangers who showed him a new path. Hakan found himself in an old, forgotten clock tower, drawn there by a strange, unexplainable pull. Inside, he met a man named David, who held a compass just like the one Hakan now possessed. It wasn't long before others started to arrive, each carrying their own compass. The first was a girl who extended her hand. "I'm Rena," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I repair old watches and make better mistakes each day." Hakan shook her hand, taken aback by her straightforward introduction. She walked past him and settled onto a wooden bench. Soon, more footsteps echoed in the dusty space. A soft-faced boy with broken glasses, clutching a stack of notebooks. A tall woman in her mid-30s, still in her city nurse uniform. And a pair of teenage brothers, laughing and playfully punching each other's shoulders as they entered, their school uniforms slightly rumpled. Hakan noticed something striking. Each one had a compass, and each one smiled at him, a knowing smile. Eyes, as if they recognized a part of him that he hadn't yet discovered himself. David gestured for Hakan to sit, and everyone naturally formed a circle on the benches. "We gather here once a week," David explained, his voice calm and reassuring. "We come together to share what our compasses are teaching us." Hakan looked around the circle, his skepticism plain on his face. "And what exactly is that supposed to mean?" he asked, the question sharp with doubt. Instead of answering directly, David simply nodded towards Rena. She stood up, her posture relaxed. "My compass pointed to the bus depot yesterday," she began. "Honestly, I thought it was a mistake. I mean, the bus depot? But I went anyway. And there, on a bench, was this young boy. Just crying, completely lost. It turns out, he had run away from home after failing an exam. He was scared and alone. So, I just sat with him for about an hour. We talked. He's back home with his family now." As she finished, the group nodded in understanding, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Hakan swallowed hard, a strange feeling stirring within him. Next, the nurse stood. Her face was kind, though etched with the lines of long shifts. "My compass sent me to the side of the hospital building right after my shift," she said. "It was late, and I was tired. But there, on the stairs, I found a man sleeping. He was the father of a child in critical condition inside. He was so exhausted and worried, he hadn't eaten in 2 days. I couldn't just leave him there. So, I took him upstairs to the cafeteria and made sure he had a hot meal. That was all." Again, the same quiet nods of approval rippled through the group. Hakan felt a lump forming in his throat. These stories. They were so simple. Then, the teenage brothers stood up together, a nervous energy about them. "Ours led us to the riverbank," the older one said, his voice cracking slightly. "We found an old dog stuck in the mud. It was whining and couldn't get out. The younger one chimed in proudly, and we bathed it." A few people in the group chuckled softly, and Hakan saw Rena mouth the word adorable. Hakan stared at each of them, a profound sense of bewilderment washing over him. These people weren't heroes in shining armor. They weren't mystics performing grand miracles. They were just ordinary people. A watch repairer, a nurse, a couple of students. They were doing small, simple, almost random acts of kindness. But listening to their stories, he realized something profound. Those acts mattered. They mattered to the runaway boy, to the exhausted father, to the trapped dog. They were small ripples of good in a vast ocean of indifference. Finally, David's gentle gaze landed on Hakan. "Your turn," he said softly. Hakan blinked, caught off guard. "Me? But I didn't do anything." A jest. ... I just climbed to the rooftop of this tower." A quiet fell over the group. David's reply was gentle but carried immense weight. "And that," he said, "was more than you've done in a long time, wasn't it?" The words hit Hakan like a physical blow. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His throat tightened, and he had to look down at his hands to hide the sudden rush of emotion. 'Cause it was the truth. Had been stuck in his grief, in his apathy, in a life that felt like it was standing still. For so long, just moving, just getting out of bed, had felt like climbing a mountain. Climbing to that rooftop? It was the first real step he had taken in ages. It felt monumental. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting David's. "I don't understand," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "What is this group? Why do you all do this? Why follow a compass that doesn't make any logical sense?" David offered a soft, tired smile, a smile that held both wisdom and weariness. It was a smile that said he understood Hakan's confusion all too well. This is where Hakan's journey truly begins. It's a journey not about finding a destination, but about embracing the path. It's about learning that purpose isn't always found in a single grand revelation. Sometimes, it's found in the small, seemingly insignificant moments. A conversation with a stranger, a meal for someone hungry, a helping hand for a creature in need. These compasses weren't pointing to a treasure map. They were pointing towards connection, towards empathy, towards the very heart of what it means to be human. They were teaching that the biggest changes often start with the smallest steps. Hakan had taken his first step by climbing that tower. Now, he stood at a crossroads. Would he dismiss this as a strange coincidence and retreat back into his shell? Or would he dare to follow his compass, to see where its illogical, nonsensical needle would point him next? What do you think he should do? And more importantly, if you had a compass like that, where do you think it would lead you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.